Barry, what is the first time that you thought about starting your own business? Is it something that you always thought about? Did it kind of come to you in the middle of the night? How did that all come about for you?
Yeah, I mean, growing up being around small businesses most of my life between my grandfather, my dad, my uncle, I always had that burning desire and, that entrepreneurial type spirit. But at the same time, I was on a job in pharmaceutical sales where, each day and as that industry progressed, things didn't have much meaning. Obviously trying to talk a lot about purpose and things of that nature. That job was one where I definitely learned that every day, if you don't have purpose in what you're doing, things are definitely not going to be very meaningful for you. You're not going to, reach your full capabilities and things of that nature. So I began to research, and my uncle and aunt actually had a commercial cleaning business down in Savannah, and they had started, I think, around 2001. So by 2004, when I was really getting the itch, I'd been able to watch them for, 2 or 3 years do what they did and kind of seen how that industry progressed. And I thought, man, I'm in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm going around to doctors' offices every day. So why not talk to these office managers that I'm already having to gain a relationship with about a commercial cleaning business? So from there, I began to realize that there wasn't many people that specialized in providing a medical focused type cleaning. That was just, they were just hiring the, commercial cleaning company that cleans the library, that cleans, whatever restaurant, whatever it may be, to clean their medical office. And I thought to myself, there's got to be a better way. And so that's where we came up with of course, 360 Clean, and, started it part-time. My mission originally was just to keep my wife at home with my second daughter so she could not have to go back to work. And I'll tell you, Chris, after about 8 months, I began to realize there was a lot of opportunity there, especially with the specialization. So things just kind of rolled from there. And, then we packaged it, obviously, with the JannyMed system, which was more of a specific focus, branded focus on how to clean a medical office. And then fast forward, from 2004, 2005 to 2008, it had really become a good brand, a good process. And then, of course, that's when we began to franchise. And that's really where I started to realize that this couldn't just have a, strong effect for me and my family, but it could start helping other families when you start bringing in franchise owners and things like that. And obviously becoming very gratifying to watch them grow and prosper as entrepreneurs as well.
I want to go back to what you said about your family ties in business, right? So I think you mentioned your father, your grandfather, and obviously your aunt and uncle were in the commercial cleaning space specifically. But what types of business, were your other family members in? And then what things did you observe, growing up or even in adulthood from the way that they operated their business that maybe helped you in deciding whether or not to start a business, and then as you continued in that journey?
Sure. The first one I had exposure to was my grandfather, and he owned a Western Auto, which is, obviously way back many years. And he sold, all types of things in that store, and then he developed it into a furniture store as well. But the things that I saw him in a little small town in Allendale, South Carolina, taking families who didn't really have a whole lot. And I can remember every Christmas they would start coming in, and maybe coming in November, but maybe it was probably closer to early December. And that's when putting things on layaway was a big, big thing. And so they would come in and basically pre-purchase things on layaway and make small payments. So he would have this warehouse in the back, which is stacked with people's stuff, and normally kids' toys and whatever it may be. And I can remember my grandfather, even on Christmas Eve, would still be delivering stuff out to families before he even drove back to Blackville, where he lived, which was about 30, 40 minutes away, to celebrate his own Christmas, making sure that those kids in that family got what their parents had worked the last year or whatever it may be, and puts things on layaway. So you see those type of things. But then at the same time, during those same times, it was kind of all hands on deck. Even me being very young, I was trying to put bicycles together, which I wasn't very good. They still laugh about that to this day. But it's all hands on deck with the family. And even at lunch, I can remember, we talk about this a lot now. The whole family would gather in the back of the store and make ham and pineapple sandwiches or whatever it may be. But It was just it was a true family owned business. I think that term gets a little loosely used these days, but I was able to see that. And of course, my dad, he had an Ace Hardware, and I worked in it when he got that around 87. So I was about 12 years old. So I was working in that. He then went on to start building utility sheds. So my brothers worked in that, and you really saw that, but it's a lot of the same things, making things work for people, because you're talking about an area that's very rural. There's not a lot of money there. So you're really having to make things happen. I mean, my dad did this program, Rent to Own, and, there's just a lot of things that you had to do for a bigger purpose. And so it wasn't just always about bottom line. So, I think there's all kind of purposes. I don't think one's right or wrong. I do think if it's all about bottom line, there's going to be problems. You got to have something bigger than that. But just the exposure to those things. And then, of course, my aunt and uncle with the commercial cleaning business, they had a lot of the same things. My uncle he's really good at developing relationships with his employees, taking care of them. And it was all because, my grandfather was his father in the Western Idaho. And he actually took that business over after my grandfather passed away. So he was rooted in those same systems where it was all about people, and again, a very loosely used word now in 2025 where, it's about the people. Well, this was really about the people, back in some deep roots.
So one of the things that, and I don't think I've talked to you about this part of your story just one-on-one before, although I've read it. So I want to expand on it a little. I remember seeing or hearing that when you're thinking about starting your own business, the business that ended up becoming 360 Clean, you decided to take a vacation with your wife, Allison, and go down to, I think, Key West, right? And took some business books and kind of had a little, I guess, business retreat, right? So tell me about why you decided to do that and then what you learned over the course of those few days.
Absolutely. We had already started the business in a part-time manner. And I can remember it was a Hilton back then, or maybe it was a Westin. But anyway, we still stay at the same hotel. We still look at that same room anytime we're there and can kind of reflect on those times. But I just remember doing a lot of reading during that week. And I was at a point where I had to decide, okay, am I going to take that next step, or is this just going to be, what it is? And, obviously in Key West, you see a lot of people coming in and out in yachts and all these kind of things. So your head's spinning like, how, obviously when you're young, especially this was 2005. So I'm, 30 years old. You think about how can I get there, all these things. But at the same time, the book that really framed my mind about business was E-Myth. And I think the version I had was E-Myth Mastery. But that book, I think if you're going to own a business is got to be should be the foundation of your mindset, because it talks about going from, a technician to a manager to a true entrepreneur, which again, another word that's overused nowadays, as far as entrepreneurship and so forth. But, the E-Myth just kind of framed my mind. It got me in the right mindset of where I wanted to take things. But more than anything, it taught me that I wanted to build systems and processes and so forth. So from that trip, I can remember being on the way home thinking, literally on an airplane, just highlighting stuff in that book, thinking, okay, this is what I want to do. And, right or wrong, by mid-August, I'd resigned from the job in pharmaceutical sales. And, most people were like, oh, what are you doing? Opening a cleaning business? Because, back then, 2005, being a pharmaceutical sales rep, that was like a very popular thing to do. So, that trip just, it gave me a chance to, obviously in a very area that I love, a cool area, to just kind of open my mind up, think a little bit deeper, and did a lot of reading. And that trip just, it transformed things to where they are today.
So at that point, you're running the business part-time while you're working your sales rep job. Was it kind of like, hey, 9 to 5 or whatever your schedule was, go do your thing, and then after hours, you're going in the evenings to go, like you're doing the work yourself, or you're hiring people? Like, how is that structured?
Yeah, we hired people right away. But I will say that we always filled in if someone was out. And we did have one account in the early stages that we kept ourselves, and we did on the weekends just to kind of learn the business a little more. But no, I can remember, yeah, I mean, you take the suit off and you go and you check to make sure everything's going right. One of our first large accounts was Low Country Orthopedics, Tricom Street. Their phone number I guarantee is 843-797-5050. I can still tell you that to this day, because it was the foundation of what we had. But yeah, you get out, you go, and you just put on a different hat, a much different hat, obviously. But from there, I learned a lot about the employees and what it meant to them. I think so many times people not take advantage, but take for granted that even though someone's working an hourly job, going back to purpose, if you find people that need a little extra income and it's for a good reason, we had people who were grandmothers that were also raising grandkids, and maybe they needed to buy them a car. Maybe they were helping furnish their college education, whatever it would be. I still to this day tell people those are some of your best people because there's a good purpose. There's a good why. It's not just to make money to go out on the weekend and things of that nature. So, but yeah, going back to your question, yeah, I would, take the suit off and jump out there and do things. And obviously then too, you begin to realize this feels a lot better. You go do that for 2 or 3 hours. It's like, okay, I'm building something. So
How scary was it? I mean, you mentioned that people were saying, "Oh my gosh, you're giving up this." You've got pharmaceutical sales reps a good job. It's a good job.
Right.
You've got benefits. You've got stability, presumably. You've got you had a young daughter also at the time, right? So that
I did.
to me,
She's
that's
8.
kind of like, she's 8.
Yeah.
And so, when you're working through that and you're thinking about, you're doing this part-time, which is different. To me, you have a full-time job and you're supplementing, building something on the side. Maybe it just stays that way, but you made the decision, let's kind of go all in on this. So I guess my question is just how scary was that when you're thinking about, I'm literally giving up, a salary to go all in on this business?
It is very scary. And I think the things you really think about, especially with having young kids, is like insurance and things of that nature. So you really have to make sure you dotted your I's and crossed your T's related to that. But I tell you that, Chris, there's fear at every level. There's fear starting out, in 2005. And then there was fear even at different plateaus of taking on different account sizes, different customer sizes. And then obviously jumping into the franchise piece was, a huge fear. But there's still times today, 20 years later, that we're looking to make moves and you get some anxiety. I guess now you have a little bit more to fall back on because you've built a little bit more cushion and a little bit more, platform there. But there's still anxiety that comes with some of the next moves. But I think like anything, it's, you got to trust your gut, you got to plan for it and push forward. But yeah, I mean, that is a big piece of it. But I think too, going back to getting in business for the right reasons, I feel like if you're getting into business and owning a business for the right reasons, that pushing through those things are going to be much easier, especially during the hurdles and during the adversity. But, I tell people all the time, if you're looking to leave a job to get into owning your own business because you don't like working for somebody else, keep the job because you're always going to work for somebody else. Right now I work for 70 franchise owners every day. You know what I mean? And because those are our first line customers as a franchisor. Those are my biggest customers, and that's who I work for. That's who our staff works for. So no matter if what you do, you're always going to be working for somebody. So.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. So when you go out, you just mentioned how that was pretty cool. You remember, your first account, their phone number, all that.
Yeah.
What's your process of going in? And I know you had your aunt and uncle to lean on, right, to kind of figure some of these out. And honestly, not everybody's going to have that, but some people will, or maybe you've got previous experience from, the business that you're starting up. You've already worked in that space, et cetera. But how do you go to somebody where you're basically like a doctor saying, this is my first surgery, and
Right.
getting somebody to sign up for that? Like, how was that part of it for you?
Fortunately, I had my uncle who I was able to lean on, and he went in with me. So you have that resource, and that's a lot of kind of what we do at 360 Clean as well. You already have a structure, you already kind of have a brand there with you, and that's I have to give him credit. That's kind of how that worked, but obviously that's where I learned too that it's a lot easier when you have that platform and you have that support. Similar to a franchise model, but at the same time, he wasn't always there. So you certainly, it became more of a relationship piece. I think, following up and building that trust with folks, and obviously position yourself as something different in the marketplace.
So take me through the steps of, we kind of outlined some of this, but part-time business while you're still working, quit the other jobs so you can go all in, and now you're building up just your own business, right, in the Low Country, your own commercial cleaning business. How long does that process go before you start thinking about, I think we've got a model and systems here where we can expand and get into the franchise conversation? Walk me through how that kind of came about.
So you're talking mid-August 2005, I leave the job and get into it full time. And I would say as we began to take on more and more customers, I felt like once we hit a certain level in what we call monthly contract volume, I said to myself, do I want this to become something much bigger than it is just here in Charleston? Or do we want to expand to other cities? And so I began to research all the different avenues of expansion. And I'll be honest with you, franchising was pushed to the bottom several times because I think in franchising, there's folks who are doing it, like in anything, the right way. And then there's folks who are doing it in very unethical ways. So it was really pushed to the bottom. But the more and more I went through it, the more and more I realized it would be the way that I could have the greatest effect on what I like to do, and that's motivate, coach, and train to a certain extent people. And I felt like too that it would have more gratification because they would own their own business. They would be certainly independent using our systems, our brand, and so forth. But I felt like that was going to be for my purpose and my why and why I'm in business would have the biggest effect for sure.
Well, one piece of that is 360 Clean is, and correct me if my terminology is off here, but it is a low-cost franchise, right? So,
correct.
A lot of franchises out there that are some huge name brands in our country or even in the world. If you kind of look into, hey, I'd like to start my own business, let me start looking at franchises. They're very expensive, frankly, right?
Correct.
And a lot of times you're talking about brick and mortar. There's a lot there. How did you start thinking about the structure of how do I do this? Like literally, how do I franchise? And then how did you figure out, hey, what's my price point going to be? A low cost versus let's get as much as possible, right up front. Like what was the thought process there?
You're right. There's definitely a lot of franchises where you've got a lot of expense and investment before you take in your first dollar. And that to me wasn't really an attractive piece. What attracted me to the commercial cleaning and franchise piece was that you could draw all walks of life and you could maybe give an opportunity. I shouldn't say maybe, we've done it many times. Give an opportunity to someone to own a business like this that maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to. So we to this day still structure our franchise in a way that it stays affordable, a low investment. We try to structure our franchise fee in a way that, I tell them all the time, like we have increased it, but we're realizing that the increase is based on what we know it takes for them to be successful and the things that we need to be able to do for them to be successful. Whereas some franchise companies, obviously they just increase franchise fees from a profitability standpoint. But, I felt like, in the early stages, we really needed to make sure that they came in, they got the proper training, the proper structure. But at the same time, I know that first year is so critical for any business owner. And, we wanted to make sure all those pieces were in place. But where I'm at now, I wish I would have done this, say, 10 years ago, being realistic, and obviously 20 years ago would have been great. But even if I wish I'd have gotten to this point 10 years ago, is that I feel like the most important piece is making sure that they're getting in the business for the right reason. And that's why I'm on the mission I am right now, is because I've seen it so many times. People get into business and capitalization is the issue, that's why I failed or what have you. But to me, when you really dig down deep into it and don't just look at maybe their last few months, if you look back, take a whole glimpse of it, it's either they got into business for the wrong reason, maybe they didn't like their job, whatever it may be, or it was all about money, or they got into it for the right reason, they had a good why or a good purpose, but they lost it somewhere along the way, which can naturally happen through adversity and things of that nature. Sometimes success can change people, and sometimes failure can change people. But I feel like what the mission I'm on right now is for us to bring in franchise owners who are getting into this for the right reason and help them stay focused on that. Cleaning is just a byproduct. Cleaning is the easiest aspect of what we do, especially as a franchisor. It's helping them understand what they're getting into, making sure they're getting into it for the right reason, and then putting structure around them and holding them accountable to stick into that structure. But again, if I could go back and change, and of course you learn these things, but now I'm 50, I guess, and gray, get a little bit wiser. But money's one thing, making sure people are capitalized to get into the business, but I think what that purpose is and what that why is and helping them stay focused on that is a big piece.
So let's expand on that a little bit, on the purpose and the right reasons and the why. So, for you, and we talked about this a little bit, but when you're thinking about starting this business and you're talking about the itch that you had, like you referenced that, what is that for you specifically? Because you did get into it for the right reasons and have stayed in it for the right reasons and done well, obviously, but that beginning purpose of getting into it for the right reasons, deciding to franchise for the right reasons, like what were the specific things when you started the business?
As far as the why, my why?
Yeah, your why. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you first start out, obviously I felt like I wanted to have a bigger impact on not just my day, but things around me. The job I was in, I felt like a glorified UPS guy just delivering samples of drugs and of course that industry was beginning to change as I was getting out. But I felt like I wanted to do something too that would be more of a legacy business. I'd seen legacy businesses, especially with my grandfather. And so I felt like this industry could do that. I felt like this business model could do that. But at the same time, I wanted to help other people because I feel like my success is obviously can be gratifying. Your failures or your education, your success can be gratifying, but at the same time, other people's success being a big driver for me is very gratifying, especially when I look at many of our franchise owners who, and they'll tell you, may have not ever had a chance to own their own business in their lifetime if it wasn't for the opportunity that we provided. And of course, they've worked their fannies off to get where they are, and all credit goes to them. But when you look back at the whole picture, and you've got some franchise owners that have been with us 15 years, 16 years, and you see them develop, and you see what that's done, and then you see the lifestyle that they've been able to build. I mean, I can think of a franchise owner right now, male, female, right here in Charleston, South Carolina, that I know this business has afforded them to be able to take a parent in and have that flexibility and so forth, and where a job can't provide that, but they have built that over time. And that's, another piece of purpose. Do you want to build a lifestyle and all those kind of things in your business? But just to see those things, and there's so many stories, not just that one, that people have been able to do things and experience things and build a lifestyle and a life that they're proud of.
When you think about some of your franchise owners for 360 Clean that have had the most success, like how often can you tie back remembering those first conversations with them? And I know they can evolve, right? Like all business owners learn, evolve. They can change for the better. They can change for the negative. But what are some of maybe the things, the purpose drivers, I guess you could say, that you kind of think about in the early days for them that now you look back at them years later and you go, okay, it's worked because that person had a specific purpose or several different things that they were looking for?
I think like anything, people mature over time. And some of ours that have been around for a long period of time, their early years were not like they are today. I mean, I can think of one right now that her early years was not very good. And she matured over time. But I think, Chris, the thing I've seen with this specific one is she got laser focus, and kind of tie in. I don't want to go too far off on this, but I think nowadays what we're dealing with in 2025 with entrepreneurship and business ownership is social media has skewed what it means to be a business owner. You only see the highlights. So many people are talking about what they're making today and all this other things, and they don't share the true story behind it, where we all know that still a majority of ones that start fail. So I think that's skewing things from reality as it relates to that. But to watch these franchise owners, specifically the one I'm just thinking of, mature over time. And then sometimes they come in and don't have the right purpose, and then they gain the right purpose, whether it may be a family member joins the business or what have you. But yeah, I mean, it's been very gratifying to watch some of those transitions. But, I think for everyone that we've had that came in and started out with a bang and then maybe something happened and things didn't work out how we wanted it to, or they didn't want it to, we also have the ones who have also progressed, and maybe the early years, maybe the first 5 years, 6 years wasn't great. But they've either become laser focused, found the right purpose or whatever it may be, and have become successful with it.
How do you mentioned earlier, you and the rest of your team, a big focus is just helping people, not just look at the bottom line or not just give them a brand and systems, but being able to coach them on how to build up their own business, because you've done it, right? That's how 360 Clean started. So how much of the time is spent, trying to help them find that purpose, right? And not just, hiring employees, firing employees if you have to, looking at the bottom line, doing books. Like, how do you kind of integrate all that into the process for them?
Right. And it's something that, again, like I said, I wish we would have been more focused on this 20 years ago. But it's something in the last few years and really, especially in the last year, that I've really started to wrap my heads around. But you got to have deeper conversations. And that's what I've been trying to talk to our team more about. Is my big thing is don't talk at people, talk with people. Don't talk at our franchise owners about what should be done or how it should be done. Talk with them. And that's what I want us to become better at, because I feel like sometimes when you're in a more of a support role or whatever it may be, you feel like you're the teacher at the front of the classroom. Well, I mean, that's good to a certain extent, but sometimes you got to sit back and let people talk, and then you'll learn a lot more. So I think that's a big part of what we do and what we're trying to continue to do. But at the same time, you got to give entrepreneurs some autonomy, let them do what they feel is best. And then, let them come back and see where things are. But, how we're trying to, bring them back to their why and bring them back to their purpose is certainly something that's in process. But, I feel like that it's going to become a major component of certainly what we do at 360 Clean.
Any business is in business to, obviously a business has to make money, right? Or the business does not ultimately survive. And you're not able to live out the business's purpose if it doesn't exist, right? Of course. So how do you marry not staring at the bottom line all the time? Whether you're thinking about your days, just operating an independent business, you're coaching your franchise owners who own their own business, or even where the chair you sit in right now, where you're overseeing, franchise operations for, like you said, 70 franchise owners. Like, how do you not stare at the bottom line and kind of marry the purpose with let's make money and let's thrive as a business?
Absolutely. I mean, money is going to keep things afloat. We all know that. But I feel like you can't let that piece define your purpose and define your day in and day out. I feel like that, as you start to progress in business and grow in business, and you do start to have larger profits, then you got to stay true to that purpose, because what starts to sneak in is ego. And then when ego starts to sneak in, you start to make decisions based on ego, whether it's go buy this truck that you don't need or go buy this that you don't need. And you start to lose focus of what that purpose is and what that why is. And I think, again, bottom line is key. We businesses have to be profitable, but at the same time, when you look at that bottom line, is that bottom line, are you going to stay focused on your purpose and your why with what you do with that bottom line and how you develop that business? Because, the other side of it, I think you asked me earlier, you mentioned successful franchisees. There's been times in the last 20 years that I felt like ones that are successful are the ones that have the most sales and things of that nature. And I today feel like that's totally wrong. I feel like success is when they're truly, obviously they can, be profitable and things of that nature. But at the same time, if their purpose is being defined and they feel fulfilled and all those things, they're successful, whether they are, our top performer or whether they're middle of the pack. If they feel fulfilled and they've got that, their purpose is fulfilled, what else really matters at that point? And so I think as you grow and you mature, I mean, even myself as a business owner, you start to see those things a lot different.
Are there situations where you feel like, where do you land on this? Some people say anybody can be an entrepreneur. Everybody should try to start their own business. Or you've got the camp that says, frankly, and we need all these types of people, right? We need some people who start their own business. I think we need people who work for a company for their entire life, whatever it may be. Right. Do you feel like everybody's cut out to be an entrepreneur, or some just frankly aren't?
No, I don't. I feel like even if you don't own a franchise, you've got to be coachable, because as I said earlier, you're always going to have somebody telling you a different way to do things. No matter if you're if you're whatever you're doing, there's always going to be somebody involved, if it's a customer or whatever it is, and you got to be able to listen to your team as well. If you own a business with a team of 50 people, you still have to be able to listen to their feedback. And I think more importantly, I don't think businesses today work, and this is my philosophy, some people don't agree, but I don't think hierarchy is respected as much as it used to be. Right or wrong, I don't think it is. I think it's more of a lateral type deal. I've heard people say, well, we do this in our business because we have a hierarchy or whatever it may be. I think that's outdated. And I think that, things today have certainly, changed from that standpoint. You have to be very collaborative. So I don't think everybody's built for that. I think, and that's not right or wrong. Some people want to feel the peace and comfort in knowing that next week I'm going to get this amount of money in my checking account on payday. And being in business for yourself, that's not always how it is. So no, I don't think everybody's cut out, again, for entrepreneurship. But, at the same time, going back to what I said earlier, I think entrepreneurship is an overused word. I mean, as you know, there's solopreneurship and all those things nowadays, and some people are more built for that. But the true entrepreneurship and building a business with a team and all those things, there's certain people that I would certainly not suggest doing it, because I just think they would be miserable for certain reasons.
When you're talking to a prospective franchise owner, and we went over some of the, the things you would hit on with them, some of the information you're trying to gather along the way to make sure that it's a right fit, right? And that you're not just selling a franchise to, check a box and everything. But what types of things are you really looking for that you feel like make right off the bat? Like if you can kind of reverse engineer, you mentioned purpose, but is there any, I don't know, like walk of life or background or experience that in this particular space for franchise owners has worked?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, there's several factors that relate to our business specifically, but if I was just looking at selling a business opportunity or franchise of any type to people, I think adversity. See, yeah, I tell our team all the time, like we don't have, we can't see the future. We can't see inside people, and I think that's the hardest part. And I always tell them that, look, we're going to find out no matter how you feel about this person after training, through the sales process of awarding them a franchise, you're not going to know anything about them until adversity strikes. And that's when we find. So if there's something in their life that we can dig out, or something maybe in their past career to where we can hear of some type of adversity and how they overcame those things, it certainly helps. But I think that's probably the biggest piece, is how are they going to handle adversity? And that goes back to what your last question about, is everybody cut out for entrepreneurship? And that's probably one of the biggest pieces, is that you're going to have so much adversity, especially in the early years. I mean, heck, I've been doing it for 20 years and I face adversity every week with certain things. But that's probably the hardest part, is that you can't see inside. You can't see what their guts like when adversity hits, or what their heart's like when they hit adversity. So, well,
and another thing is, you mentioned earlier that people often see the end result of a business that's been built, right? Like a lot of people that, you follow or I follow, like we're going to see, oh man, they've achieved this, but then you go back and, you learn their story from 10, 20, however many years ago, and it wasn't always pretty. And a lot of times there was a ton of failure. So when you're talking to a prospective franchise owner, and you can point to, hey, we have a system, we have a brand, here's some example outcomes, real outcomes that some of our franchise owners have had. How do you try to mix, like, this is achievable, but it's not going to be easy, without, turning them away from the idea of owning a business?
You have to be very careful. And I think that's where we have done it the wrong way, not intentionally, but you do have some very successful franchise owners, and you put those numbers and things out on your website. But I mean, my philosophy when I was involved with the franchise awarding, franchise sales process more heavily, my process was always, I'm going to tell you about this franchise and about this opportunity, but I want you to make a decision if you want to join this after talking to franchise owners. And all franchise owners of any system are good about not fluffing, because, entrepreneur to potential entrepreneur, they want to tell them the real story in most cases. So, hearing it from them, I don't want this. I always say I want it to be a matchmaking process. Let's see if they're a good fit for us and if we're a good fit for them. And they need to make those decisions on talking to franchise owners. Of course, our folks and our team is going to tell them how great it is and all those pieces. But a lot of people on our team have never, they've never started a 360 clean franchise. They've never been in that first month. So talking to franchise owners is definitely a way to go. But it's a very good question, because it's a very thin line you walk, because they're wanting to hear the good things. They're wanting to talk about the good things. They're wanting to hear, what's the average, unit sales and all those things. But that's just a byproduct. Can you live the day to day of what it takes to run any business, whether it's commercial cleaning or whether it's, a restaurant or a sign shop or whatever it may be. There's a lot that goes into that, and you need to go see it. You need to hear more about it. You need to feel it, and all those things before you make a decision.
Now that you have, this isn't going to be the right word, but I don't want to say refocus, but you do seem to have business purpose, on your mind a lot more, right? Mm-hmm. Nowadays, I mean, you've talked about that here in this conversation. This is a very cliche question, I guess, but when you're thinking about the next 5-10 years of 360 Clean, how does this focus on purpose maybe change, anything about how you're doing business nowadays?
I think, Chris, what it does is I was getting to a point where we had built a team that was handling a lot of the day to day. So even though I still focus on big picture things and I do still talk to franchise owners and all those pieces, I wanted to make sure that I was still plugged in a way that still, gratified me, gratified my why, gratified my purpose. And I'm like, as you say that, I'm like, well, or as you say, as I said that to myself, I'm like, well, let's pass this purpose piece on to our team. And then I got to thinking about it more, and obviously discussions with folks is that, this isn't just about our people, but if, and I'm not doing this to see how many clicks I can get or how popular it can be, because I'm hoping it affects a lot of people even outside of 360 Clean, because that's the real piece. And maybe it's 10 years from now, someone comes up and say, hey, I heard this or I read that, and it really helped me that day when I was, just starting my business or whatever it may be. So that's kind of where I sit now. And I want to have an impact on, making sure more than ever that the right people with the right purpose get in the seat as a 360 Clean franchise owner. And then secondary, if there's other people that come to this website and hear about purpose and so forth, and it helps them get through their work day and as a business owner and they learn something from it and take it on, I mean, that'll be even more gratifying. So just for me, it's still trying to live out that purpose. Talking about purpose, I guess, is probably the way it's come down to.
If you were talking to a business owner, let's say there's a business owner who has, another service type industry. Hey, I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. I have an HVAC company. I'm a plumber. I have my own plumbing company. And if they're kind of going through that same exercise that you did, 20 years ago or so, where you're thinking, I could expand this thing, can I franchise it? Should I franchise it? What questions should they be asking, and how can you validate whether or not you might be a good fit to expand your business and think about franchising the brand? Getting technical with it, you've got to have systems and processes in place. For one, you got to have a brand that looks franchisable. If it doesn't look like it could be something that looks like it could be a national brand, you're going to have a tough time. But then you got to have the systems and processes in place. But you've got to also test, can it be done without you? So many people they own businesses, and right or wrong, it's not a bad thing, but they are involved in every aspect of it. So if they can remove themselves and it can be duplicated, then you got a chance. Or if they can remove themselves and put in a team that can also teach those people to do those same things, you got a chance. But if a business is so dependent on that one individual, it's not franchisable, because you can't create 50 of that person. But at the same time, I would say nowadays, where my mindset is now is same thing. Why do you want to own a franchise? Why do you want a franchise? Why do you want to do this? If you want to do this, if you want to franchise your business to think you're going to make more money and all those things, you're doing it for the wrong reason. Because I know people in the commercial cleaning industry that operate in one town, one city, maybe it's Dallas or Atlanta or wherever it may be, and they make more money than a lot of franchisors. Because there's a lot that goes into franchising from an expense standpoint and so forth. Just to have a franchise disclosure document and all those things, it's a lot. So I think for again, back to what I said earlier, if you want to do that, it's just like buying one. You better do it for the right reasons, because there's a lot that goes into it. You can't just look at you can't look at McDonald's and all those pieces, because that's a different world, and you're probably not going to be in that world. So. Well, when we're talking about purpose, to kind of close things out here, I know family is very important to you, and I mean, when you're thinking about purpose, probably nothing greater than family, right? So,
right.
How much did that weigh in for you in thinking about all this, I know you've touched on this a little bit. How much did family weigh into the purpose piece for you? And then also, would you have any advice for people who are already in business with family members? They own a business with, a spouse, or their spouse works with them, or they have a sibling like you do who works with you. A lot of people say, the reason I ask this, don't get in business with family, don't get in business with friends, right? And so I think you're a case study against that in a lot of ways, but what advice would you have for those people?
I would say family with business, this is what I've learned, is that family with business is good as long as your skill sets are different. Because I've seen it many times. And too, if the person can delegate and let go, which I've been good at and haven't been good at. Brent, my brother, may tell you a little different. But no, he's really good at the organization standpoint. His temperament's a lot different than mine. He's a lot more mild, maybe. He thinks a lot longer before he responds than I do, maybe sometimes. So those skill sets are a lot different. Allison, my wife, her skill sets are, and she'll tell you, way different. She's operation driven. She's HR driven. She loves that stuff. Like when issues come up, that are more personnel, even related to franchise owners, she works through those things, and she's like, I'll handle it. And I'm like, you act like you like this. And she goes, I love it. And I'm just like, it's bizarre. People that love operational problems and solving them, that is bizarre to me. I'm like, why? But anyway, there's people built for it. And, Martin, our COO, he's the same way. But so, I think having different skill sets is the most important thing. Two people that are totally on marketing, a husband and wife team, and all they care about is marketing and all those kind of things, good luck. Because you're never going to agree. I just feel like separating the skill sets. And we see the same thing with franchise owners. Some of our most successful franchise owners at 360 Clean are husband and wife teams with different skill sets. Mm-hmm. And so, I think that's a big piece of it. Patience and all those things obviously is part of it, and there's a lot of cliches things you can say about it. But to me, how you survive with family members in a business is as long as you have different skill sets and people do their own thing and handle those pieces, it can be a good thing. So
tell everybody who happens to catch this, I know you've got resources on your website that people can check out to, right, learn more about purpose in business. And if you're thinking about starting a business, how do we think about it? Tell people how they can find you and what types of resources you have, and maybe what you're planning here in the next little while too.
Sure. I mean, obviously with our purpose powered process and mission that we're after, that's barrybodiford.com, BARRYBODIFORD.com. That's the easiest way to find everything there. And what we're doing there is I'm just putting out top of mind content as much as I can and trying to keep it as real as possible. Obviously, doing this today, we'll be even talking to some of our franchise owners and hearing their stories and hearing their purpose. None of it's teed up. It's all going to be just straight organic. Tell us how you feel, kind of like we're doing today. And hearing those things. And it's not going to be about 360 Clean. It's just going to be more in depth about them, whether they own one of our franchises or another one. So continual blog content there. You can subscribe there to continual newsletters and blogs and videos. And then obviously as it relates to 360 Clean, easiest thing is 360cleanfranchise.com. And you can learn more there. But, my big mission here is obviously at the barrybodiford.com and then purpose piece there. So that's what we're doing. And again, I'm doing this because it's fulfilling a bigger purpose that I want to carry on from here. But at the same time, again, it's not about likes, it's not about comments, it's about impact. So I hope that's what it does.
All right, good stuff. Thanks a lot for the time.
Thank you.